Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into the absolute blueprint of one of the world's most unique democracies, the French Constitution of 1958. Now you might be wondering, how exactly does a country design a government completely from scratch to prevent historical disasters from repeating themselves? Well, let's dive in and see exactly how the French Fifth Republic engineered this ultimate balancing act.
Right off the bat, Article 1 of the French Constitution hits us with this: France is an indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic. Now, those are massive, sweeping ideals, literally forged in the fires of revolution. But as we all know, grand ideals don't just govern a country on their own, right? They need a solid, working structural framework to actually survive. And that begs a really compelling question. How exactly does the modern French state protect these core ideals on a day-to-day basis without falling apart?
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. First, we'll look at the quest for stability, then the birth of the Fifth Republic, the two-headed executive, the bicameral parliament, and finally the ultimate balancing act.
Section 1. The Quest for Stability, or as I like to call it, a history of pendulum swings.
You see, the system France uses today definitely wasn't their first attempt at democracy. Actually, it was born out of intense historical chaos. Starting with the French Revolution back in 1789, France fell into this relentless cycle. They established a republic in 1792, but by 1799, the pendulum swung rapidly right back to the centralized authoritarian power of Napoleon. Fast forward past empires and kings to the Third Republic in 1870, a system that suffered from an incredibly weak presidency. This constant, exhausting struggle between weak parliaments and overly strong executives really set the stage for a breaking point by 1946.
And that breaking point is captured by one totally staggering number: 20. During the Fourth Republic, which lasted only 12 years, France went through more than 20 different governments. Think about that for a second. That is barely enough time to even unpack a briefcase. The executive branch was just completely paralyzed by endless coalition politics, culminating in the 1958 Algerian crisis. The country was literally on the brink and desperately needed a reboot.
Which brings us to Section 2, Birth of the Fifth Republic, and finding that just right solution.
So the crucial point is, to cure this chronic instability, General Charles de Gaulle and Michel Debré were on a mission. In 1958, they engineered a completely new balance of power, the semi-presidential system. They knew they didn't want just a parliament because historically, those were far too weak. Nor did they want just a president, which felt a little too monarchical for the French. Instead, they created this Goldilocks framework. It features both a remarkably powerful president and a prime minister who remains accountable to the legislature.
Section 3. The two-headed executive. Let's look at sharing the power.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the 1958 Constitution intentionally divides the massive burden of running a country by splitting the executive branch right in two. On one side, we've got the president, the head of state, directly elected by the people, focusing on the big picture stuff like foreign affairs and national defense. On the other side is the prime minister, the head of government, appointed by the president, whose job is to basically get their hands dirty with the day-to-day domestic administration. Notice here that only the president holds exceptional emergency powers, so national leadership is deliberately kept separate from daily bureaucratic administration.
Now, to ensure the state never collapses again like it did in the past, the 1958 Constitution granted the president some immense, specific superpowers. They are the ultimate guarantor of the Constitution. They can appoint the prime minister, they can literally dissolve the National Assembly under Article 12, command the armed forces, and even assume exceptional emergency powers if the republic faces a grave crisis. This was all designed to make the president the unshakable anchor of the nation, directly curing the weakness we saw in past historical presidents.
But, as you might be thinking, this structure begs a fascinating stress test question. What happens if the directly elected president and the prime minister end up belonging to completely rival political parties? I mean, if they hate each other, doesn't the whole system just freeze up entirely?
Well, actually no. The system has this built-in escape valve called cohabitation. Think of it kind of like two rival CEOs being forced to run the exact same company. When the president's party loses the parliamentary majority, they are essentially forced to appoint a prime minister from the rival party. So the prime minister takes over domestic policy while the president retreats to focus almost exclusively on foreign affairs. It's a highly pragmatic compromise that keeps the government running smoothly even when voters decide to split their tickets.
Moving to Section 4, the bicameral parliament. This is the legislative engine.
This is where the actual lawmaking happens and where the prime minister is ultimately held accountable. The French parliament is divided into two distinct houses. The National Assembly is the absolute heavyweight here. These 577 directly elected members make laws, pass the budget, and crucially, they can actually overthrow the government through a vote of no confidence under Article 49. The Senate, on the other hand, is indirectly elected for 6-year terms. They review bills and represent local authorities, but they cannot dismiss the government. Only the National Assembly holds that particular sword over the Prime Minister's head.
The legislative flow itself is highly structured. A bill is introduced, it's examined by a committee, debated in both houses, and then approved before the president signs or promulgates it into law. But let's say the two houses just can't agree. The system doesn't grind to a halt. The directly elected National Assembly generally gets the final word, which ensures there's always a definitive path forward.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds into the ultimate balancing act, engineering democracy.
So we have a powerful president, we have a prime minister handling the daily grind, and a parliament making laws and keeping the government in check. But where do all these complex pieces actually intersect? Right here, at the Council of Ministers. Meeting weekly at the Élysée Palace, this is the highest executive decision-making body in France. It's chaired by the president and includes the prime minister and all the government ministers. This is the literal room where differing priorities must be hammered out into one unified strategy for the country.
When you really step back and look at it, de Gaulle's and Debré achieved something incredible in 1958. They looked at a painful history of paralyzing government collapses and engineered a true Goldilocks model. They created a strong presidency anchored firmly at the top, paired with a government that is highly accountable to Parliament. It's a completely distinctive constitutional model, meticulously designed to stabilize the state while still responding to the democratic will of the people.
But as we look to the future, we are left with a pretty provocative question. As modern political majorities continue to fracture and shift, will this carefully engineered balance of the Fifth Republic actually hold? Can cohabitation stretch enough to accommodate the intense political polarizations of today, or is the Sixth Republic simply inevitable? It's a profound constitutional test playing out right in front of us in real time. Thank you for joining me on this explainer today. Keep your eyes on France, because understanding the system is absolutely the key to understanding its future.